Let's talk just for a second, and I will take 5 or 6 minutes to talk about what comes next, because that was my task in this. I talked about we need to look at what's changed in Africa since we started in Uganda, and we need to look at what's changed in CPC since we started in Uganda. First, what's changed in the 20 years that we've been involved in Uganda, much has changed in Africa, and those who look at social history would say that most of that does not look very good. Over the last 20 years, you would see things like Zimbabwe and its collapse of government showing the impact of the death of colonial Africa. The story's not finished. We would look at places like Rwanda and Goma, and we would see the terror of lawlessness in tribal Africa. And in many ways, while it's easy to demonize one side or the other, one of the unspoken problems in the Rwanda massacre is that this is Christian on Christian. We have also seen in the Sudan the price of a religiously torn Africa. And again, that story is not yet over. And if we were to say what's one thing, we would say that we would be 10 or 15 years ahead of where we are in the mutual development of Africa if it were not for the plague of HIV and AIDS. It has ripped the guts out of a generation and a half of Africa. Not Africans, of Africa. And we will see development being affected for the next 20 years. All that's on the grim side. On the flip side, who would have predicted peace in South Africa at the end of apartheid? This is a miracle by the hand of God. Who would have seen the Blood Diamond Act passed overwhelmingly in the Congress, the growth of Botswana, the wells of Ghana, the forgiveness of debt for third world countries? These are places that God has moved the hands of the powerful in Africa, and lives are being changed. It is not hopeless because people like you have stood up for what they believe God wanted to do, and together we have acted. Perhaps most significant for us as a community of faith is that about halfway through our journey, the AIDS thing had come to full flower, and all the wonderful gains that we were seeing in Kenya and Uganda especially were being seeded. We were taking great steps backwards as our most gifted leaders were dying. And one of the things that we saw happening was that the church was not engaged in Africa. We were maybe one of the little exceptions. John Good was the mission pastor at that time, and he and I would be embarrassed every time we were asked to go someplace else and say, what is God doing through Christ Presbyterian Church? You guys were out at the front end of the line. And we were embarrassed because of how little competition there was. And our prayer was that one day we would be in the third wave, that the giant ships of American Christianity and all these young churches in the American church would learn from us and go past us. And one of the thrilling things to me is to hear Steve's report how church after church after church sponsors 1,500 in a month, sponsors 500 in a morning, gets engaged with an entire community, and we have had the privilege of being the catalyst to see some of that happen. There was a survey done that said in 1996 that when American Christians were asked if they would support victims suffering and dying from AIDS, 4% of Americans said yes. 4% of American Christians said yes, significantly lower than the American population at large, because we, in the Christian community, associated HIV and AIDS with promiscuous sexual behavior, and saw that sinful behavior as nobody would ever say out loud, this is their just desserts, except for some wackos, but there was a lack of passion around trying to get involved. That dial has been moved. It has gone from 4% to 8% to now 12%, and there are places that are excited about how we get to help our brothers and sisters. Africa has changed, CPC's changed. I can do this part quicker, because you've heard Steve. We have over the last 20 years seen the power of partnership. That it is not the dollars we have sent, it's the stories that Louise and many of the others of you have told. The idea of partnership shows us there is a hunger in the American church for relationships around the world. Not for projects. They're cool. You can build a school, you can build a clinic, you can blah, 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 blah. But for relationships. And that will be a part of whatever we do next. Second, we have seen that working in places of low resources changes us more than it changes them. Andronatsios was working for World Vision when I started, went on to become the head of all the government distribution of aid for the United States government, and his word to me one time was, "John, I believe that God puts the poor at risk in the hands of the rich at risk and saves both of them." God puts the lives of the poor at risk in the hands of the rich at risk and saves both of them. And I think that that is what's happened here, and we want to do it again. I guess, close to preaching. I want to see us do a 2.0, and I'm glad to talk about that in the question and answer time, where we might go, what we might do. But in 2.0 of our partnership with Africa, I want us to see us do something that will make everything that we have done before look like kindergarten, and we're ready to go to first grade. How fun would that be to take the lead again? Not as the masters, but as the students, learning with the brothers and sisters of Africa in an exciting new way. Last thing I'll say is, one of the things that I want to do different next time is that in 2.0, this church will be aligned with that church. World Vision will be a great broker, but it will be the Church of Africa and the Church of the United States, so that in the end, the heroes of, whether it is southern Zimbabwe or southern Zambia or maybe Mozambique, wherever we end up finding ourselves, the heroes will be the elders and the deacons and the pastors of the local church in that country, who will say, by the way, there's some church in the United States that's giving us some help. But they will be the ones that God will be putting into the front lines, and we will be cheering from our stage. Wouldn't that be cool? Hey, I'll stop there. I'm glad to give some hints about what we might do next, but we want to answer questions about what we have said to you, about what you read. And Steve actually has tons of other experience around the world in what's happening in China and Myanmar, and we would be glad to just be open for 7-10 minutes to your questions. Anybody, as we've talked, want to respond to something that was said? Yeah, Tom.
What about our kids who are not that are in Uganda but are not in Rakhine?
The question was, what about our kids in Uganda who are not in Rakhine or Masaka? Great question, because it really depends on what's happening in the particular ADP, Area Development Project, that wherever in the world your child happens to be involved. So what we will not have 1,500 sponsored kids all graduated in July, October, December of 2009. They will be scattered throughout, some before that and some well after that, in whatever particular ADP they have, and we will be getting you an area information specific to your child and where their ADP is.